Greetings. My name is Guy Dauncey, and this is a show called Change the World, where I like to invite people on from the Nanaimo region and now increasingly down towards Victoria as well, who are wanting to make a difference in the world, who have sometimes big, bold ideas, and a sense that things need changing. And today I'm really privileged. My guest is Sheryl Armstrong, our newly elected councillor for Nanaimo City Council, sworn in yesterday, right?
That's right, Guy, yeah.
And by way of background, Sheryl's got 35 years as an RCMP officer, working with First Nations, including the Tsleil-Waututh in North Vancouver, honoured with the First Nations name.
Yes,
What was your First Nations name?
Lakahanen, which means dragonfly. It was
Dragonfly.
gifted to me by the elders because I always had dragonflies going around me, following me, and it's funny, while I was going through this election, dragonflies were following me.
There you go. Yeah. So dragonfly is easier than dragon lady, which could be
could be both.
Game of Thrones kind of stuff.
That's true.
Also, in working in Nanaimo, you were in charge of community policing, so
Yes.
you're working with a lot of local organizations, including being a member of the Nanaimo Fentanyl Overdose Prevention Group.
Yeah.
And you are chair for the Dufferin Place Family Council, secretary for Vancouver Island Family Councils. I don't have children, so you'll have to tell me more about that one.
That's actually for seniors.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't say I'm not a senior. So anyway, what made you decide after 35 years in the RCMP that you wanted to jump into helping out on the council in Nanaimo?
Well, I decided to take like 6 months off, 6 months to a year before I decided what I wanted to do. Like, I was fortunate I was able to retire relatively young for this day and age. And then the opportunity came up for the city council position. I've always been interested in politics. However, I don't really affiliate with any party because I believe in portions of each party's platforms. So I was talking to some people whose judgment I trust is, well, you know, you're more cut out for community politics because there you can really make a difference.
Yes.
So when the opportunity came forward after Wendy had resigned, I thought, you know, do it.
Yeah.
So I threw my hat in and I was very fortunate, and I've been given the mandate to try and fulfill that role.
So this is maybe a curious question, but there were like, I think 12 or 13 candidates.
13, yeah.
And you won like 50% of you got 3,000 or so, and the rest were 800, 210, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it was that made people resonate with what your message is?
Part of it is because I have been actively involved in the community.
Right.
I was here from 1990 to 1997 as an RCMP officer on the streets, and I volunteered in a program called the Neutral Zone.
Yes.
So I met a lot of people through that. I was involved with child abuse for many, many years.
Yes.
And then when I came back the second time working in community policing, I went to a lot of community events. Like when there was something down, like bathtub days, I'd be down there. You know, you have the impaired goggles. So I got to know a lot of people, so a lot of people got to know me.
And they get to trust you.
Yeah, they get to trust you, yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, it's funny because I used to always get, oh, you're not a typical cop. And I always found that comment interesting, right? But, you know, I think the other thing is that I think my police background did play something in this role this time, because governance for a lot of people is an issue. And working in the police force, you know, governance is what we do.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you take a look at the oversight. You have your NCOs, which is non-commissioned officer. They're providing oversight. Then their bosses are providing oversight. The public provides oversight.
Right.
The courts provide oversight.
Well, what we see in America when there's not oversight, things can go wrong pretty quickly. If you haven't got the right training and things, you know, I mean.
Yeah.
So oversight plus the philosophy of community policing, which is like the opposite of the old-fashioned way you come swaggering in with your car.
Yeah.
It's intimate, it's personal, it's relationships, right?
It's very true. Like, I grew up in small town Saskatchewan. My dad was RCMP and he rose up very high. And I saw the effect that one police officer can have in a community.
Yes.
And I vowed that when I became one, that I wanted to stop people from going to jail, not put people in jail.
Right.
It's a part and parcel, but I didn't join to put people in jail. I joined to help. And I think when I took over community, like I said, I spent 16 years doing child abuse and homicide, which was difficult. But the hardest part in my career, and people kind of are surprised when I say this, was community policing, because it's so all-encompassing. Like, you know, crime prevention is a big model, and trying to sell crime prevention to people is hard because you can't measure results, right? So I remember a person said to me, you know that such and such a community has school liaison unit and they don't have a problem with youth? I said, yeah, but they did. Right. And it's like, prevention costs money.
Yes.
But where do we cut? As soon as we think we need to take the dollars, you cut the prevention because you want to put it into enforcement.
Which is crazy. I mean, prevention clearly needs a better PR job about what it is.
It is,
right?
because if you think about it, if we practice policing the way we practice health, or if we practice health the way we practice policing, you wouldn't be getting immunizations.
So maybe we should rebrand prevention as money-saving policing.
Well, I firmly believe that. I think that's good. So I think, working in that field, and right now too, when you look in our community, affordable housing is a huge issue.
Yeah.
And I saw that firsthand. I don't know if you heard when it really brought home to me as I was doing a patrol when I was in community policing, and I came across a lady with 2 young children in a station wagon. I said, "What are you doing here?" Well, she couldn't afford her rent, so she took her last savings and brought the station wagon so her kids could lie down in the back seat. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
This is we've got level entry jobs here, the working poor don't get any attention.
Yeah.
And that's a huge issue for me, because as I see our prices going up, and you see people working 2 and 3 jobs just to try to make ends meet, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
I do recognize that's a federal and provincially mandated thing, but what people have to realize, when people end up on the streets, it becomes our municipal issue, because policing, fire go to calls, your ambulance are going to calls, outreach workers, city planners, it becomes a municipal issue.
Well, I had the director of the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Coalition on the show.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he was telling me that in the current, in the past Liberal government and working with the federal government, they put up all these millions, and there was a lot of new units being promised, and there was 140 new units going to arrive in Nanaimo for affordable and social housing. But the waiting list has 4,000 people on it.
Yeah.
And it's just such a massively larger problem than the current solutions are tackling. Mm-hmm. And with the price overflow from Vancouver now beginning to come here. And if you live in Vancouver, I got a friend who's 2 friends who are farming. They're selling their farm in Yellow Point it's a 40-acre farm, lovely barn, full lush blah blah, and they're selling it for something under $1 million. The purchaser is selling 1 condo in North Vancouver. He can trade 1 condo for a beautiful 40. So there's something crazy, and probably put money in the bank. So with that pressure of rising house prices, we're seeing the impact on the lower people struggling to pay the mortgage, struggling to pay rent, couch surfing, homeless, living in vans. And it's really wrong to me. Something has to happen. Right?
And that is a concern for me, because if you want to attract development, and economic development is something I believe in, because you have to have that.
Yes.
But if you don't have level entry housing, because a lot of the jobs that are going to come are going to be level entry jobs. Not everybody starts out at 80, 100,000. I mean, those jobs are few and far between. So what are we going to do for the people that are making $30,000 and $40,000 that can't afford $1,500 rent or $2,000 rent? Then
Yeah, I don't know about here, but on Salt Spring, where you've got a big tourist economy of $10 to $15 an hour wages, in the summer the people in those jobs are sleeping in the woods with their children.
Yeah.
Because there's just no one's thought about the need for rental accommodation for lower income people.
It's very interesting when you talk about that, because I put on one of there's many different political websites, so I threw out to all of them, do you think the city should be in the business of affordable housing, and in what manner? And the ideas that you get are unreal.
Tell me some of the stuff.
Well, one that I've just recently researched was the Whistler Housing Authority, because Whistler had the same thing. I used to be stationed in Squamish for about 8 months doing the operations side of the house. And we would have numerous fatals every year of their workers because they commuted from Squamish to Whistler because they couldn't afford living in Whistler.
And fatals meaning?
Oh, sorry, fatalities where people would die in car accidents. Yeah, because the roads would get bad. And and then Whistler wanted to keep their community, like the seniors that had lived in there for years, they wanted their employees. So they developed a Whistler Housing Authority.
Yes.
And you can get mortgages through that.
Yes.
You can get subsidized housing apartments, same thing with seniors.
Yes.
So that was a thing that that we should be looking at.
It's well established, and so Nanaimo could do the same thing.
Is that something they want to do? But everybody talks about the community charter, so things have to be changed. Like Vancouver has its own charter, whereas we fall under the community charter provincially. So you'd have to look at that. Then somebody also sent me a thing about, actually it was from England, where they did certain, I don't know what they call them, but they're sort of like projects where you have all sorts of different socioeconomic groups together, because I think that's really important.
I think mixing is really important.
I think it's critical.
Otherwise you get this sort of ghettoization and all the rich. And frankly, a ghetto of rich people living together is just as bad as a ghetto of really poor people living together.
Well, it's very true. I remember back in I think it was around 93, 94, we had affordable housing go into the north end, just off of Dover Road, Dover and McGurr. And the outcry from the people up there is, we're going to have this, we're going to have that.
Yeah.
Never materialized.
I know.
Never any issues.
Yeah.
And, I say to people, just because people don't have as much money as you doesn't mean they're criminals, doesn't mean they want to have a nice house, doesn't mean they want to keep a clean house.
Yeah.
I've been to $1 million homes that are not well looked after.
Yeah.
So I think we have to get over that, the NIMBYism.
Yeah.
When I was actively involved in the low barrier housing, again, the Uplands Walk, which is on Uplands, and I remember people were saying, oh, they're going to be beating on the old people that are coming from the seniors villages. That's never happened.
Yeah.
That didn't transpire, because what people have to remember, if you get people into housing, then you can hook them into help, because they're going to be on the streets regardless.
Well, what I've learned, because I've done quite a chunk of work on the housing issue, that's the program called Housing First for homelessness.
Yes, I know that, yeah.
That it's saying basically, if you're homeless, first get them into a home. Then you can address alcoholism or drug dependency or mental health issues. But to address those issues while they're homeless, you haven't even got the security of your personhood to be able to get a baseline. And Medicine Hat in Alberta has successfully eliminated homelessness. It's a city of about 60,000, so comparable to Nanaimo. And their definition is like no one should be out on the streets for more than 3 weeks, because someone new arrives, it takes the time, but 3 weeks is not long, right?
Regina's got a new housing program too that is looking very interesting too, and right now it's more focused on First Nations.
Yes.
And it's starting to have some success, but once again, it's done by grants, and there's no federal provincial money in. And I mean, they have to start looking at that, because you can't expect your cities to pay for this constantly. There has to be better partnerships.
Yeah. Well, I know that the Liberals, the past Liberal government, were being proud of having produced 1,500 new units of affordable housing a year. The NDP were, in their commitment pledges, were saying 11,000 units a year. So it's a much bigger commitment, and hopefully that's going to come through with more money.
Yeah, and I think we have to look at how are we developing those projects too. Right now, that is a situation that is going before City Council with the Collery Dam lands, where one of the councillors wants to sliver off a parcel of the Collery Dam lands for affordable housing.
Yes.
And that's become a big issue. So like I've been doing a lot of research on that.
So taking it out of parkland, you mean?
Yeah. Well, it's not designated parkland.
Okay.
That was the designation was going to go there. So that's become a big issue, and we need to look at that, because I think too, like, when you talk about affordable housing, you have to see what is around the area for those people. Like, like you don't want to throw them out in the middle of nowhere where they can't get to support systems or whatever.
I mean, I grew up in England, where the traditional English village is A, it's high density, close, everyone can walk to the centre. B, it's got a high street. The tiniest village will have 10, 15, 20 shops on it, and you walk in there. A, you've got your economic needs, but also you're meeting people all the time. You've got social connection and building that sense of community. You don't have a loneliness. And just shoving a housing project at the end of some suburb somewhere, when it doesn't make sense. Yeah,
and that's why, like, I think when they looked at this, like, from my perspective, I don't think it should happen. Like, we have to, what is our affordable housing strategy? I have yet to see it. Like, I would like to see that.
Yes.
And you can't just go off to, in my mind, without looking at a plan first. Like, it's nice to say, oh, we're going to do this, but what's our plan? Is it conceivable?
I mean, in South Nanaimo, there's lots of streets that I see with single-family dwellings on them. Some of them old miners' houses. You could easily rezone that to allow duplexes, triplexes, and high density without affecting the quality of life.
Well, and we were talking about this. I don't know if people are aware, but the City of Nanaimo's been holding community engagement sessions. The first one was Monday night at Bevan Park. Only 5 people showed up.
About which topic? About?
Just community engagement. How do you want people in general?
Okay.
Like, so, like, how do you want it? Do you want town halls?
Maybe that's why they didn't show up, because there wasn't a focus to know what they were talking
about.
Yeah,
that's a good possibility. But I was talking to a lady that runs a resource center, and we said, there's different types of affordable housing too, and there's different types of models. Not one model fits. You know, because some people only need a bachelor suite to start with. Then there's some that would maybe need a 1-bedroom, or some might need a 2-bedroom. And then as they move on, then they move out and they move up. And
do you know about the grow homes in Montreal?
No.
Avi Friedman was an architect who developed the concept of the grow home. And it's a house that's zoned to be up to 3 stories, but it starts off as just the ground floor only. So when you're a young couple, you just got the ground floor. And the rest is built, but it's not painted or anything like that. And then in your own time, you can get in there, extend to the first up floor, and then later, when you have kids, you fill the whole house. The kids leave home, you can contract and live on the ground floor and rent the upper space out. So it's a really flexible home designed for that change of status.
Yeah, and when I was in North Vancouver, I was stationed in North Vancouver as well, so I know what you mean when you talk about cost, and there's a lot of high density in North Vancouver. And then they started some co-op developments, because not everybody has to have a big kitchen. So they did the co-op thing, and I mean, there's a place for that too. So we have to look at different strategies. Like, people are talking about the little tiny homes. Yeah, that's great for a single person or maybe one person, but is that going to work for a family of 4?
No, it's not.
So we need, so we need to look at a mixture. And I mean, I think I've been finding it fascinating how much knowledge is in this community that we don't tap into.
So do you think, what is the current council approach to thinking about this?
Oh, it's on the agenda. People are very concerned about that.
Is there a committee or a task force or something like that?
Yeah, there is. There's an affordable housing strategy being in the midst. And I, speaking for all these individuals, I shouldn't, but I do know that it's a very big concern for them all.
Right, yeah. So you were also saying you had background dealing with sexual abuse, trafficked teenagers, troubles like that. And I know that's an issue locally.
You know, when I was
tying into mental health issues and the opioid
it's interesting that you say that, because when I first started here in 1990, we used to document, and we had 5 girls working the streets. That was it. And then when I left in 1997, I think we're up to like 30 or 40. And there's different reasons why people work the street.
Yes.
You know, sometimes it's because they have 2 little kids and they can't afford to do anything else. Sometimes they're being pimped. Sometimes it is for drugs. But I do believe mental health has really come into play now. I think that a lot of people with mental health have the concurrent disorders, right? So they start to rely on the drugs to get them through it, because what people forget about, it costs a lot of money for prescriptions. And if you don't have a good plan, how do you afford your prescriptions? What if you're suffering from severe depression and you can't afford to go see a counselor? So you self-medicate, and that's when we get a problem.
So how do you think City Council can really assist the need of people struggling with mental health issues, and especially combined with poverty sometimes?
Well, we need a mental health strategy, I believe, from the city. Now, there is an open house August 1st, and I believe it's 203 Albert Street, to start the dialogue. So I joined up. I'm going to go. It's 2 weeks. So I joined up to go, because we have to listen to the people that are dealing with them. Like, and that's, you know, your outreach workers. That's your police, your fire, your ambulance. Like, those people deal with those people on a regular basis. What are they seeing? What are some of the strategies they see? And why aren't we asking the people that are suffering themselves? You know, it's like we always tell kids what are best for them instead of asking. So why aren't we asking, what do you need? You know, like, when I was looking at the fentanyl situation, when they popped up that safe injection site. Well, from my research, that wasn't the best spot. You know, when I talked to the ambulance and the fire, no, we're not going there that often. We're going to an area more towards Prudhoe and Kennedy. So, like, it changes.
Do you think that big brothers and big sisters, it can play a role in sort of mentoring teenagers who lack a father figure, you know, and so they've got someone to hold their hand?
That goes to my Kids for Kids program that I've been volunteering for 6 years.
Tell me about it.
Well, Kids for Kids started, we were at, there used to be a large group of us that always met regularly in the community on different things. Like, it happened to be at a therapeutic community meeting when we used to have therapeutic communities here, which we no longer have.
Tell our viewers what a therapeutic community is.
A therapeutic community is a way to start helping people with addictions in a nice positive environment. It's not like, you know, like the Guthrie House, which is at our Nanaimo Correctional Center, puts people with drug addictions through the program, and it starts helping them deal with their addictions. Why did they become addicted? So, So now get back to Kids for Kids. So Kids for Kids came about as a bunch of us meeting, and we found that some of the kids were 15, 16-year-olds thinking, you know, it's okay to live on welfare the rest of your life. Well, what we have to remember, welfare has always been meant as a stopgap measure to help you through the difficult times. So we thought, how can we help them see that there's a future? Because some of them have low self-esteem. They're not smart enough to go to university in their minds. So we started showing them a whole different world. And I remember one kid said, he said, I didn't know you could go to university to study culinary stuff. He says, so I don't have to be really super smart.
I've read that there's a for the middle and upper class families who've been through college, the mere fact that they know how to get there and what can be done, they pass that confidence on to the kids, and the kids know it. And they also know where to apply for scholarships and funding. But if you come from parents who never went through college,
or the foster system,
that isn't passed on to you. And even if you've got the brains to get into college, you may not know about the assistance and the support and the scholarships you can apply for, so you get shut out. It's a kind of passive discrimination.
And so that's one of these things this program does. And it was originally started for 6 and 7, grade 6 and 7s. Well, we've got kindergarten kids coming and stuff too, because a lot of these kids are looking after their little brothers and sisters, right? So we would have guest speakers come. There's a group that learned how to sew. So we've got young kids, grade 4 and 5, they're sewing their dresses, pillows, and just to watch them bloom, that they're good at something, and you know, they get that esteem. Because for me, unless you have self-esteem, you're not going to be successful.
Well, to me, the best way of learning, I mean, I've been lucky, I've been a lifetime learner all my life, but once you get a fire with wanting to learn something, nothing can stop you. But if you're just sitting there and someone's passively trying to teach you something and it's not engaging, you slump down and you feel bored with it, right?
Or somebody tells you you're dumb.
Well, that's even
worse.
Like,
we hear that a lot. Like, you know, I used to go in homes and you'd hear that, you know, I wish you were never born. Like, oh my God, who says that to a child, right? Like, you know, I know they're upset, whatever, but so these are things that you have to face. And as a city council, I think when we get behind a mental health strategy to help them to, you know, whether it be finding a city-owned building where they can meet, or, you know, helping pressure provincial and federal governments, or being prepared when these grants come along, because a lot of times there's grants and they're a one-time hit. And if you're not prepared, you lose out to the other communities that are.
2 weeks ago, we had young Tegan Marshall on the show, who's like a 15-year-old, who's been in the foster care system all his life. He was born prematurely, like 28 weeks premature, and he has cerebral palsy. Oh. So he's in a big duty wheelchair, speaking with difficulty, and he's become a champion through a social justice program at his school, a champion for girls who are being trafficked. And I thought, this is a 16-year-old being out there as a social leader with all his disabilities. And I think, wow, and how many other kids who think they're dumb or think they're no good are sitting on this ability to become, with the right mentoring, he happens to get fantastic foster parents.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you're saying. I think Big Brothers and Big Sisters are a fabulous program. The problem is we can't get enough men sometimes into the program, to help foster.
Right. Do the men, do the men in the program have a support group for themselves? Or
I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, because if I can imagine if you're doing a Big Brother thing, if I was doing it, I probably wanted someone I could talk to who understood what was going through, and otherwise I would just do it and then I go home and.
I think that's a really important part too. Like you have to understand a lot of these kids where they're coming from. You have to understand that they're going to act out. They're going to be make mean comments, and you have to get past that barrier because they're testing you. So, but I think it's an excellent program.
But to have if other men are going through it as well, and once a month you get together and share and discuss and support each other, then you're getting a peer group for yourselves, as well as doing the work of mentoring.
But have you ever found that there's not really a lot of support groups for men? Like a lot of our dollars go into women's issues. Like I've always fought for like we need to get more dollars into men's groups.
And part of that is the men's culture, which I grew up in, and most like we're supposed to have it together. We're supposed to be emotionally in control. We're not to admit to weakness. If you admit to weakness as a boy in school, it's thump, punch, and forever, da-di-da, you're in trouble. So you learn to be tough, even if whatever's going on inside. So these days when I see some basketball star or baseball star admitting that he's got anxiety problems or some other, it's very empowering to say, even successful people struggle with issues. I mean, I had a lot of self-esteem issues when I was a teenager growing up. I had broken family and all that sort of stuff, and it sits inside you and erodes away until you find the strength to deal with it properly.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head. What happens to you as a child stays with you forever.
Yeah.
I mean, if people made fun of you because you were fat when you were younger, you're going to think of that your whole life.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we see that time and time again with a lot of these kids, and so that's where I think, like, if we come together with strategies to help combat that, and the mental health strategy to me is you got to start because younger kids have a different issue than older kids.
Yeah. So the one I was bullied at school, and the gift that it gave me, which I certainly didn't appreciate at the time, is that it sensitizes you to other people's suffering. And so it's among those who have been on the rough end of life, they can be much stronger social justice champions because they know what it feels like.
Yes.
And so there's merit in sort of drawing out their leadership in different ways, right? So with council, everyone knows things have not been going as rosily sweet as they ought to have been, right? What do you think you can bring to council to help address the dysfunctionality on council itself?
Well, this is how I look at it. My job is to go in. It's to read the issues, to research the issues, make sure I understand the issues, and then vote on them.
Yes.
I'm not going to look to see how my neighbors are. I'm going to listen to what they have to say because they could have good arguments or good pros and cons, but I'm not going to be swayed.
No, on the issues, but if you see bad process happening.
Oh, I'm a process person. I will call on that. Like I said before, if I think somebody's making really rude, ignorant comments towards somebody, whether that be a staff member, a council member, or somebody in a delegation, I'm going to ask.
So what's your
stop.
style? Would you call that in public, or would you quietly take them aside afterwards?
First of all, I'm going to ask them to stop.
Yes.
Like this behavior is not acceptable.
Right.
And I'm going to ask you to stop it. If they continue, I'll deal with it privately later.
Yeah.
If it's directed towards me,
well,
definitely I will deal with it privately because you don't have to have the last word. I see it time and time again. When people have the last word, that's when you get in problems.
Yeah, well, that's a classic in marriages, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and that's what gets issues going. Like, it's a classic. It's a lot of complaints against police officer because the policeman had to have the last word instead of just saying, "You're right, I'm stupid." You know what? It doesn't mean I'm stupid, but it ends the conversation. Well, I'm not, and people get in these arguments and
or even to come in to say, yeah, I was wrong there. Thanks for pointing it out. Things like that.
There's lots of things you can do, and I think that's really important. The other thing is that I've worked with each one of these individuals before in the past, like on different committees and stuff.
Yes.
I've never had any issues with them. They've always been very polite, respectful to me, all of the council. So I'm hoping that continues. And like I said, I don't want to go in there thinking it's going to happen. Like, I think that's doing a disservice to them as well. And I also think that the event center was an eye-opener for a lot of them.
Yes.
So I think that
Do you mean the hockey thing that didn't happen?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
How could they get it so wrong that 80% of the community?
And this is where I think the community needs to step up too, right? Like here we've got a prime example. We've been doing community engagement, and we have 5 or 6 people showing up, 15. So here you've got a group of council members. So because I hear this, what's your vision for Nanaimo? What's your vision? What's your vision? I said it can't be my vision. It's got to come from the community.
Yes.
And my job is then to find out, is it fiscally responsible? How many people does it support?
Yes.
Is it going to make sense for the community? That's what you need to look at, because we had 5 councillors that had a vision.
Yeah.
And the community didn't like their vision. So that's where the community needs to step up to the plate, in my opinion, and tell us, what are these visions? Like we have that ocean discovery.
And sometimes, because the public can be frustratingly obtuse, the way to get them out is to say, we're going to put a prison on your street.
That's right.
And then, they'll all come out and discuss what could be better.
Well, you're exactly right. Like, I mean, you take a look at that. We said if we would have been doing something on, let's say, because everybody says, well, you shouldn't do things in the summertime, and 6 to 8 is not a good time, but if we would have had the snowbirds flying through town, they'd have been there.
They'd have all been
so,
there,
people have to step up to the plate and start saying what you want, what you need. We as councillors need to get better community engagement. Like I have my Facebook page, or I'll post on certain things. Like I said, I posted on the affordable housing, because I find we have so many smart people in this community of all ages.
Well, that was the set, and we've got to wind up in a minute, but in Tofino, when there was a lot of gossip and negativity going around council, when I think as Jen became mayor, she opened up a Facebook page and put everything there transparently. Here's what's happening. Nothing's in seat, not behind cameras, nothing. No. And it just calmed down because people felt they could trust the information again.
Well, that's my point. I'm going to be putting my rationales out, and I'm also seeking input from, it was fascinating to me. I had 284 comments on my thing. And the nice thing, the research was done for me, and I can go find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, where did half an hour go?
Is it? Oh.
We're out of time, believe it or not.
Awesome.
And we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Taking on the leadership of becoming a councillor on behalf of all of us, and B, for all your enthusiasm and stuff.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you, Guy. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. So this has been, my name is Guy Dauncey. This has been the show called Change the World. One of my little contributions is this book I've written called Journey to the Future, which is a fictional account of life in Vancouver in 2032, when we do a lot of the big, bold ideas we're talking about on this show. If you enjoy the show, tune in next week and you'll find more fascinating, scintillating guests. Thank you.